just for context, he was asked about how much leeway and basically rope a new OC would get, and would they have to stick to his philosophy. Big sigh in and out. But here's the deal. We've known this, right? We've known he was going to stick to his philosophy, and I don't think it should discourage fans too much, because I think I have been one to put a solid amount of blame on Brian Ferentz. A lot of people wanted to deflect that to, or defer it over to Kirk for all these years, the last 3 years. I think the biggest problem with the offense, like it or not, has been Brian Ferentz, has been the offensive play caller. I do. So it's not the only problem, but it's the biggest problem. Iowa has proven they can win games how Kirk Ferentz wants to win games, but with a better offense, with a more competent offense. They did that under Ken O'Keefe. They did it under Greg Davis at times. Ken O'Keefe had a higher ceiling, but we've only seen 3 offensive coordinators at Iowa under Kirk Ferentz. So I can tell you this right now, the people who are up for the job, all of them are slam dunk hires compared to what we're coming off of. That's just a fact. So regardless of who Kirk settles on, it's going to be a plus. Would I love for them to go out and, spread things out a bit more and try? Sure. Right. But we've said for months, Mark, when this would happen, it was not going to be a total change in philosophy. And Kirk just reinforced that yesterday.
And this is not simply, to me, about just throwing the football more. I think for a lot of fans, that's what it is. You got to throw the football more to score more points. I don't think that's it. I bet if we threw the stats up, that although Iowa would be in the bottom 20 or 25 in the nation in pass attempts, probably there would be some, maybe not.
I don't know. Maybe, and some of that's just because they've lost time of possession so badly recently. But in general,
Yes.
like percentage pass versus run, the ideal is that you can run probably a little bit more than you can pass, but you want it to be balanced. I mean, I think most teams want that.
Sure. Yes. All right. So in response to being asked about an offensive coordinator, Kirk said, quote, "I'm really not worried about points per game, but what is important is wins per game. I think there's a guy that entered the conference recently that came with widely acclaimed offensive stats and all that. That's usually how those guys become well known, because of whatever they're doing, throwing it, running it, wishbone. But then you look a little bit deeper. So that's what what's this guy's wins per game ?
So I believe that was a shot at Scott Frost. If you're reading between the lines,
okay.
I believe that's a shot at Scott Frost. So he kind of went after, and it's what's ironic about that is there was a rumor going around a week ago about Scott Frost potentially being a candidate, and right away I went on the air and said that's totally false. He's not a candidate. There's no mutual interest. But there was that rumor out there that someone started. But anyways, I think that was a kind of a sideswipe at Scott.
Okay. All right. Got that. Not that you couldn't, in theory, be a really good offensive coordinator and not a very good head coach. And then he went on to say there's usually a correlation. People who just throw the ball around, it makes it tougher to win and makes it tougher to be good on defense. There's a school on the West Coast right now that's going to recommit to defense. They gave up 42 to Tulane last year in a bowl game at a place where Ronnie Lott played. Why does he have to say this? So now they're going to think about defense, And that's obviously USC. They lost to Tulane last year. However,
they were a better team than Iowa last year, and Tulane was a better team than Iowa last year.
Yeah.
They were in a better bowl game, first of all. So, if you want to bring up what happened this year and USC's failures, absolutely, that's fair. But I think the divide that we have, and this is why I'd love to be able to get Kirk in a one-on-one, kind of an intimate interview where you can kind of sit down and talk through this a bit more, because the question that was brought up, I think it was Scott Docterman of The Athletic, basically asked Kirk how much philosophy change should we expect, if any? How much rope is the new OC going to be allowed? And then Kirk went on the spiel, and that's kind of what ends up happening. You ask it kind of a generic question, and then he goes into the spiel about what he wants to talk about. So I don't really know. I know that I blame Kirk. He's been very consistent with his stance on this. I think it would be a better conversation to have a 10-minute conversation on this subject where there's back and forth. That's what I would like to hear. I'm almost over trying to draw some ridiculous conclusions about Kirk with comments like this. He's still very defensive of his son. He brought up how he still believes a coordinator should be evaluated by wins and losses. That is illogical. Okay? That is illogical. And I can, again, you ask any other major coordinator or major head coach in the country, I shouldn't say any, I would say 90% of head coaches or former head coaches would say they have not evaluated their coordinator on any given year based on did we win or did we lose. Now, Kirk is patterning this a different way than most head coaches because he's talking about this complementary concept. But again, I would have what I would have returned with is, okay, there are games where you can play this way, but explain how you lose by a total of 57-0 against your only two top 25 foes on the schedule this year. 57-0. Like is that a problem with the whole team? Are we really going to say the defense needed to do more in those games? You scored 0. But again, I just don't think that those types of poolside interviews aren't really great for that type of a back and forth. And I'm not trying to want to debate Kirk on it, but I just think it's a fair conversation to be had. There needs to be some logic brought up, and I understand his stance. And there are some people, holy cow, there are some people who just, you go, Kirk, I love you, man. Like, it's just like this, oh, man, I love you so much. You've made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside again. And it's like, bro, like, he's been here 24 years. I love that you love him, but we don't have to be so polarized by this. We don't have to be a Kirk worshiper, but we also don't have to be a Kirk hater. I'm not a Kirk hater, but I believe he's got a blind spot with this. And I think some of that is still leftover remnants from his son's failures here, because he's never had to dig his heels in this much because the offense has never been this bad. That's the problem. So the hope that I have, Mark, they're not going to overhaul the philosophy, but a couple of the candidates that are well-known out there, all right? One is Paul Chryst. He is a candidate. Okay, that is a fact. He is a candidate. He would be an upgrade. He's a former quarterback. He coached some good offenses at Wisconsin as a coordinator before becoming the head coach years later. Andy Ludwig's another one that's been in the mix. Now the name escapes me. Joe Philbin is also in the mix. He was the O-line coach at Iowa. Then he won a Super Bowl as the OC at Green Bay, was the head coach at Miami. He's an O-line guy, so who's coaching quarterbacks if he comes here? That's a question. They promote Bud Meyer and get rid of someone else on the staff. Again, questions I don't have the answer to. Those are 3 of the 4 candidates at this point. Either way, any one of those 3 would be an upgrade. And based on what I've been told, the 4th would also be an upgrade. Significant upgrade. I'll be right back, Mark. I'll be right back.
I've got great respect for Kirk Ferentz. He's done a tremendous job at Iowa, but he's not the perfect coach. He doesn't run the perfect program. There is room for criticism just because there is room for improvement, and not just improvement. It's one thing to still need to improve, but to be working on those items in those areas, but have not achieved it yet. It's another thing to kind of discard it. And that's what he's doing here. And I know he relies on this. It's all about winning. And of course it is. It is about winning. Now, if he was reeling off national championships, that would be one thing. Then I would be completely throw my hands in the air and say, this formula is perfect. It's getting the job done completely. And again, he's been a tremendous success and everything, but he's picking on a coach that actually has a better winning percentage, significantly better winning percentage than he does. So that's not a valid criticism that he's making.
My biggest struggle with what was said yesterday was in regards to the comments, and I understand it. I understand why he said it, but he brought up how it's my belief, and it's been my belief for the last 24 years, that the best way, our best chance of winning here is to play complementary football. He really emphasized that here. And, read into that as you wish. I saw a brief clip, and I shared it on Twitter this morning. John Fanta, who's a college basketball guy, was talking to former Iowa basketball player Jordan Bohannon about Fran McCaffrey and the Iowa basketball team. And he kind of alluded to the same thing about like how, well, Iowa fans really need to understand, like, you're upset with Fran, but you're Iowa. Like, appreciate what you got here. Here's a guy who just sent Keegan Murray to the NBA. The dude dropped 12 threes the other day in an NBA game, scored 47 points. Luka Garza came out of Iowa. Chris Murray came out. Like, look what Fran's doing, and you're Iowa. I get so sick of that nonsense that I tweeted that out. I said, yep, we peasants here in Iowa need to just be appreciative for what we do get. The scraps that were tossed, so to speak. I just think that's such a loser mindset. And by the way, John Fanta's not an Iowa guy. He's just a college basketball guy, so who cares what he says? But that's the only issue I have. I understand that there are some disadvantages being Iowa. It's not USC. It's not Ohio State. It's not Bama. But I think you're selling the program a little bit short when you start talking about how, not that Kirk ever said we can't win other ways, but to say we can't adjust our philosophy a bit to bring in better skill position players on offense, perhaps opening things up, whatever that would look like. And hopefully they do that. And he's just not going to acknowledge it because they did that at times with previous OCs. Hopefully that's the case, but I don't like that peasantry type of mindset.
We do our USC show on Monday nights, and there was a comment made, and I don't want to screw this up, about where it came from and directed toward whom, but it was directed toward the strength and conditioning coach. I know that. And so there is concern on the other side of this integration of styles of play and how this is going to look, because USC, there was a comment made, and again, I don't remember who made this comment, but it was involving USC, that they're not joining the Mid 10, they're joining the Big 10. You need to get bigger, stronger. And so their strength and conditioning program and coach is under fire to be more stout in the trenches. So I looked at their first 4 or 5 games. They're really playing not necessarily the very best teams in the Big 10, but a pretty good run of physical teams. Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Penn State. I don't think that it's going to be obvious next year that, these 4 teams are coming in and they're just amazing and they're just going to light it up, and they are lighting it up, or that, now they're playing big boy football, they can't handle it. I think we're going to see some very competitive games and matchups, and I don't think either. I hear it from both sides. I hear the Pac-12 homers say, the Big 10, the quarterbacking's horrible. There's no speed. We're going to run all over them. We're too fast. And then the Big 10 about we're too tough. We're too physical. They can't play in the elements, all that. I don't think either one's true.
I agree with you. And is USC on Iowa's schedule next year? Or is it UCLA that plays Iowa?
It's UCLA.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was a little bit of an odd, like, why ruffle those feathers? If you're Kirk, like, you can bring things up and say there's examples out there, but why specifically call USC out? I get the feeling that Kirk probably just doesn't like what USC has stood for a long time. He probably doesn't like the fact that, they're able to buy and sell quarterbacks. Probably doesn't like the fact that Lincoln Riley kind of abandoned OU, or at least there was no loyalty there, right? And a lot of OU fans kind of resented that. I don't know. I'm just kind of surmising that based on the comments, but Kirk, as always, defers to wins. You and I both agree it's going to be harder to win at this rate in the new Big Ten. And so if the standard is no longer, like, one thing Kirk said, I thought this is interesting. I'm anxious to get your take on it as well. But Kirk brought up how, even though we're concerned about the new offensive coordinator, I'm focused on the bowl game right now, and how foolish it would be if I wasn't. because this is one of this. We have an opportunity to be one of just a few teams in Iowa history to win 11 games. He said that, and that's true. That's true. It's different. It's different winning 11 games now than it was even 5 years ago, I guess. Partially because the bowl games are so much different with player opt-outs and early draft enroll draftees and whatnot.